Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into another episode of the GC Show. I hope y'all are doing absolutely amazing here on this Monday afternoon. And as you might know, we're going through a little 4-part series right now when it comes to being called by God. There's 4 big parts. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the importance of having a personal relationship with God. And this week, we are talking about how you have a life of purpose. Now, you may be asking, what does it mean to have a purpose in life? I think that's a question that is asked many times throughout life. And it's just to know that your life is not random, that you were created by God for a mission. And what I mean by that is that you are here on this earth for a reason. And that mission is your calling that God has for you in your life. So we're going to jump right into the verse today. Our verse today comes from Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. And it's in a letter that Jeremiah is writing to the exiles in Babylon. He says, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." Now, I think it's really important to know the context of Bible verses. I think that's really something important to take note of. I think sometimes this verse is taken out of context, and I think that's why it's important to look at that. So, the statement, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." This was written in a letter that Jeremiah was writing to the exiles in Babylon, the Israelites, the Jewish people, because they were at a point where, they'd been in exile for so long. They're wondering, is God even with us? I thought we were God's chosen people. Does he even care about us? Is he just left us, And this is kind of like reassurance from Jeremiah, telling them hey, God has a plan for you. He has a great plan for you. And, he will get you through this. And while it was not written to us directly, and I think that's where it's taken out of context a little bit, is thinking that this verse was written to us in the present day exactly. It wasn't directly written to us in current day, but that same principle still applies. You see, the Israelites that were in Babylon were God's chosen people. And in our current day, if you have given your life to Christ, you are God's chosen people. So the same principle here still applies, is that he has a good plan for each and every one of his people. Now, I think everyone has a goal in life to find their purpose in their life. It's just something people go throughout life. They try to find their purpose in things of this world and, drugs, sex, money, those type of things. But the truth is, you can only find your true purpose in Christ. And when it comes to finding your purpose in life, there will be times where it won't be clear, and you may not know your purpose. And if you don't, that's okay. We're going to dive into that a little bit more, so I'm going to save that for a little bit later. But the truth is, with your purpose in life, is that once you give your life to Christ, once you say, God, I'm all yours, and you hear his voice, it's easier to understand why you're here on this earth. And going back to what I talked about a couple weeks ago with having a personal relationship with him, once you know him, you know his voice, and you and God are tight, you'll be able to understand his voice and know what it is that you're supposed to be doing in this world, know what your purpose is in this world. Now, the next thing, right, is that, whenever, going back to a little bit ago when I said there'll be times where your purpose may not be clear, is that God might reveal your purpose in a very unexpected way. If you, the story of Joseph in the Bible, if you don't know, I'm going to do a quick rundown. He basically was his father's favorite, had this robe. He had these dreams where he was the tallest grain of wheat or bushel of wheat, I don't know what you consider them, and all the other bushels of wheat were bowing down to him, and his brothers were like, "Dude, you're crazy," because he was also the youngest brother too. So his brothers sold him into slavery. And now Joseph, whenever he got sold into slavery, was probably thinking how on earth is this is not what I was planning. I thought they were all going to bow down to me. But little did he know that way down the line, God was with him the whole time. And he became second in command in all of Egypt, and probably second in command of all the world, because Egypt at that time was probably the most powerful nation. I guess it'd be considered a nation. I don't think they had countries necessarily back then. Anyways, not a big deal. But he became second in command, and little did he know that him getting sold into slavery was all part of God's plan, and it's not what he was probably expecting. So it was a very unexpected way that God revealed his purpose and plan to Joseph. And now the next example is Moses, right? He got called from a burning bush. God was speaking through that burning bush to tell Moses to bring the Israelites out of Egypt and go speak to Pharaoh. Now, I don't think Moses woke up that morning and was like, yeah, I was probably good. No, today I'm probably going to go out in the wilderness and a burning bush is going to speak to me. It's going to be God speaking through this bush. This bush is not going to be burning up, but it's going to be, or like not, I guess like withering away and burning up, but it is going to be on fire. And God's going to tell me to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. I don't think he planned on that, right? It was a very unexpected way that God revealed his purpose to Moses. And another example I have is Paul, right? His name was actually Saul before he turned into Paul. His name turned into Paul whenever he became a missionary for Christ. But he was on his way to Damascus. He was going to go kill some more Christians because that was his job. He was systematically killing Christians. And Jesus, revealed this light to him when he's on the road to Damascus, and it blinded Paul. And he told Paul, Paul, turn around, go start being a missionary and bring people toward Christ. And little did Paul know that, he was killing Christians and he was on the road to go kill Christians. Little did he know that he'd become the greatest missionary in the history of the world. So what I want you to know is that if you don't know your purpose in life yet, God might reveal it in a very unexpected way. You never know. And he will reveal it to you at some point. And if you don't know what it is, I would encourage you to just pray. Ask God about it. Ask God, would you just reveal to me what it is I'm supposed to be doing in this world? And he most definitely will reveal it to you. Now, like I've been talking about a little bit, you may look around, not know your purpose, and that's okay. Here's the thing with that, right? We're all running our own race in life. Just because you don't know your purpose, that does not make you behind in life. Because the truth is, we're all born, and then at different times of life, some of us are running at different speeds. Some of us are running super fast. Some of us are maybe jogging or walking, But the thing is, we will all reach the finish line. So just because you look at other people and, maybe they have a full-time job and it seems like they're set for life, and you're just over here and you're like, oh, dude, I'm not really making any money or whatever. Or when it comes to your calling in Christ, you might think oh, I'm not doing anything, but then looking around, there's all these people doing this kingdom work. Just because you may not know your purpose, it does not mean that you are behind in life. Because the race that you're running, God has you on that path for a reason. And another thing to point out too that's important with that is that your life and your purpose in life is not just based upon one moment. It's not just you sharing the good news of the gospel with one person. It's not just you speaking in front of people one time, preaching a sermon one time, but it's taking the skills that God has given you in your life and using them throughout your life for his glory. God has given each and every one of us a different skill set to work with, and we can use that skill set for his glory, but we just have to, say yes to whatever he is calling us to do. And here's the other thing with that too is with your skill set, you may look around and say, Gavin, I don't really know my skill set. I don't know what it is that God's calling me to do. And, if you feel that way, you might look around and say, I feel behind in life. Maybe God is preparing you for something that you just can't see quite yet. Everything that happens in your life happens for a reason. There's a reason why it all happens, and God is preparing you for something even if you can't see it quite yet. Those preparing seasons, he might have you in that season because the season that you're about to enter into, you wouldn't be able to survive in that season if you're not gaining the skills and being equipped with what God is preparing you with right now. So I just want you to remember that, is that you're never behind in life. Now, another thing, I think sometimes we look around and we might feel average, think there's no way God could possibly use me. And now here's what I want you to know. We look up to the people in this world who are doing kingdom work, who are on fire for God. And, I like to call them kingdom warriors, people who are doing kingdom work, the work of God. And, we look at them and think they're so special. Obviously God is using them for an amazing thing. I think they're so special, but the truth is they're just normal people, right? And I think what's the difference between kingdom warriors, the people that are doing great things in this world, and me and you who may just be normal people, is that they decided to say yes to God and actually answer the call. With these people, these pastors, these big influential Christian people in our world today, they had to start somewhere too. Where they're at right now, they're not just like, they didn't just boom, like one day just jump into that, like where they're at, like at this exact moment right now. They had to start somewhere too. And it's going to be really uncomfortable to start, but God doesn't call the equipped, but instead he equips the called. If God calls you to do something, he will equip you for whatever it is that he is calling you to do in your life. And one of my favorite quotes, man, is, there's no such thing as special people, but instead there's just people that God uses to do special things. And that could most definitely be you. Welcome into halftime, the little news section here on the GC Show. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, be sure to let me know down below, because I like hearing feedback when it comes to the GC Show. As always, if you have any prayer requests, something weighing heavy on your heart, something you're going through, anything that you know of in your life that needs prayer, I would encourage you to reach out, whether that's leaving it down below, whether that's sending me a message through Instagram, or if you know me personally, sending me a message personally. Or it doesn't just have to be me you reach out to, but anyone you know that'd be willing to pray for you. I'd encourage you to reach out, because the power of prayer is so strong, and I think sometimes we underestimate it. Stay tuned next week. We got our second Live and Lifted session. I hope to see y'all there on October 6th, 2025. The first session, there wasn't a super big turnout, and I think part of the reason is because I didn't post the link super public, didn't make it super easy to access. So what I'm gonna try to do is, I figured out this new thing on YouTube. You can do like YouTube posts. So I'm probably gonna take the link to the Zoom, put it on the YouTube post, that it's easier to access, easier to find. And then for those of you guys who, maybe you're on Instagram a lot, I think I'm gonna be doing the Live and Lifted on Zoom and also have Instagram up too. So that if you're on Instagram, you're like, oh, Gavin's doing Live and Lifted right now, then just join up right then. Don't have to necessarily hop onto the Zoom call. Something I'm still figuring out, still learning. So it's a process, you know what I'm saying? So hope to see y'all there next week at Live and Lifted. But for now, let's take it back to the second half. Here's something that I think kind of goes over our head a little bit. I think it's that Jesus probably looked normal. Now, bear with me here. Whenever we see pictures of what Jesus may have been depicted to look like on like Google or paintings, Jesus is always depicted as this, white man, like maybe not necessarily like white, but like, I don't know, looks like a god, has these long, luscious hair. He's tall, very handsome man. And like, he looks like God. But the truth is, I don't think he necessarily looked like that. And here's why. If he looked like God, in those olden days, like if he looked like God, more people would have believed that he was the Son of God. And I think the people who did believe he was the Son of God was because they saw his miracles. They saw him working. They're just like, dude, like this man may be the Son of God. The Pharisees for the longest time, they were so deep in their religion, waiting for this Messiah, and they were expecting him to be like a king, a ruler, someone who truly looked like a god. And the reason why the Pharisees probably hated him and didn't think he was God is because he probably did look like a normal guy. If some normal guy was just walking around saying like, hey dude, like I'm God, you'd be like, no, you're not. You're just a normal guy, right? And, if I was, let's just say, for example, I'm not comparing myself to God in any way or Jesus in any way, but I'm just saying, if I were to go to my local baseball field and I was telling people like, dude, yeah, I'm in the MLB, they'd be like, no, you're not. Like there's no possible way in the MLB. But then if they saw me taking batting practice and I started hitting balls over the fence, hitting balls like 350, 400 feet, and then, went out in the field, played some defense, was making perfect plays every time, they'd be like, maybe this dude is in the MLB, right? And now the thing is, people, if they just saw Jesus didn't do his miracles, or if they just saw Jesus and they didn't see his miracles, they wouldn't believe that he was the Son of God. But whenever they saw his miracles, they would maybe believe that a little more. And, the people that were yelling, crucify him, whenever he was, given over to Pontius Pilate, the reason why they're saying crucify him is because they looked at Jesus and they're like, he's just this normal guy claiming to be the Son of God. The reason why they were mocking him whenever he was up on the cross is because Jesus probably looked like this normal guy that was claiming to be the Son of God, and the people around him were probably like, or like the people that were yelling crucify and didn't believe that he was God was probably because they're like, dude, he's just this normal guy claiming to be God. There's no way he could possibly be the Son of God. Now, here's what I want you to hear with that, is that the king of the universe, who was fully God, may have looked like an average normal guy. And, I don't know for sure if he did look like an average normal guy. That's just my prediction and what I believe he probably looked like, because if he did look like a God, more people probably would have believed he was God. But here's what I want you to think. If you think you're average, you think you're just a normal person, God can most definitely use you. Because if he could use, if he used Jesus, who was the king of the universe, who may have looked like a normal guy, he can most definitely use you as well. All it takes is putting your yes on the table, man. And you see, the truth is that living for Christ is for anyone called according to his purpose. And I feel like I should throw this in there. It kind of just like hit me a little bit. How I was saying, like, Jesus may have looked like a normal guy. Obviously, he was not a normal guy. He was the Son of God, and like that your average God can most definitely use you. I'm not comparing you to God anyway, because God stands alone. Jesus stands alone. Nobody will ever compare to him. But the point I'm trying to make there is that, Jesus may have looked like a normal guy, and God used him to save all of humanity for those who believe in him and paid the penalty for all of our sins. And you, who may look like a normal person, you might think that, you have no purpose in life, that God can never use you, but he most definitely can. That's what I want you to get at. I'm not comparing you to Jesus in any way because, and I'm not comparing myself to Jesus in any way, because Jesus truly stands alone, and he is not comparable. He has no rival. He has no equal. But I just want you to understand that God can most definitely use you, even if you just think that you're a normal person. So I want to kind of throw that in there. I don't know if necessarily clarify or whatever, but I don't want any of you thinking like, oh, he's comparing normal people to Jesus. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying God can most definitely use you. So the next thing I want to talk about is, I don't want you going out comparing your callings to other people's callings. I think a big thing with, especially I'm in high school right now, and what I see is that we want to fit in, right? But the thing that stands out between you and other people is that thing that God is going to use. He will use your strengths. He will use your weaknesses for his glory. I like to think about the disciple Peter as a good example. He ran his mouth a lot, and he maybe ran his mouth a little too much in times when he wasn't supposed to. But God started the early church. Jesus started the early church through Peter. He used that thing that got him in trouble all the time, his voice, and God used that thing to start the early church. So God will use your strengths. He will use your weaknesses for his glory if you allow him to. And now some examples of that, like maybe you're not good in school. Maybe God wasn't planning on using, your intelligence in school to, bring glory to him. I saw this video, this guy on Instagram he's this pastor, and he's like a pastor with ADHD. It was actually kind of like funny to watch, like the clips, because he was like preaching and he just kind of like do something silly up there. And I think in our generation, I think that's actually probably something that appeals to people more, is because like he's not perfect. He's not this very like well put together pastor. And it's just kind of, I don't know, like God could use that. If you have ADHD, he could use that. And you're like not being able to stick on one topic, but be able to preach the gospel still. God could use that thing for his glory. I just thought that was really cool. I would encourage you to go check that out if you can. You could probably search up on like Instagram or YouTube, like pastor or youth pastor with ADHD. It's actually pretty cool to see. I thought it was pretty interesting. Like I said with Peter, if you're a talker, he could use your skills in art for the glory of God. I like to think of music with that too. He could use that for the glory of God. He could use riding motorcycles. The Church of 1122, Joby Martin, every once in a while has these get-togethers with like the motorcycle gang, and they get together and just lift up the name of God, right, and then go ride motorcycles. It's pretty cool. Like he could use riding motorcycles for the glory of God. The big example I like to think of is sports. God can most definitely use that for the glory of God. The platform he's put you on, he's put you on that platform for a reason. That's to lift his name on high. And we are all equipped differently for God's plan. So why are we out here comparing our callings to other people's callings? Because God has something great. He has something unique for you in your life. Now I'm going to set this down for a second. I have some props, a little demonstration here. I like to call this the golf ball example. Now you look here, I have this golf ball. It's a Titleist golf ball. For those of you who play golf, you might think it's a little more than average, but in my mind, it's just a normal average golf ball, right? There's many of these. And it's just completely normal and probably worth no more than $2 at face value, right? But you take this golf ball, you give it to Scotty Scheffler, who's the number one golfer in the world, let him sign it, and all of a sudden the golf ball is worth more than $2. Now here's what I want you to hear. You take your life, which may just be completely normal, completely average, and you give your life to Christ, He will fill your life with so much purpose. He will make your life worth so much more, and He will do significantly more with you than you could ever imagine. So what I want you to hear is that God can do so much more than you can ever imagine. And we have in our mind, we picture in our mind what we think God could do with us, and it's significantly more than that, I promise you. Whenever I say you have a life of purpose, I truly mean it. God has a plan and a purpose for your life. Now, kind of just like a personal story example, June 25th, you guys hopefully know the story by now. I've mentioned a couple times on the show. If not, you can go back and watch the second to last episode in season 1 where I discussed the significance of June 25th. And when I was sitting in that hospital room, I was like half asleep. My mom just kept telling me, she's like, Gavin, God's not done with you yet. God's not done with you yet. And I was like, yeah, I know, you've said it a million times. I was kind of like, yeah, mom, I heard you. But, that stuck with me a little bit, thinking that God's not done with you yet. And here's what I want you to hear. The fact that God woke you up this morning, the fact that you are breathing, that your heart is pumping blood, means that God is not done with you yet. And He has an amazing plan for you and your life. And you are here for a reason, and you have a purpose in this world. That's what I want you to hear, and that is the main point for this week's episode. So, as always, stay tuned for next week's Live and Lifted. Can't wait for that, man. Session 2 of Live and Lifted. But that's the lesson for today. That's about all I got. So, as always, remember that you have a life of purpose. God has an amazing plan and purpose for your life. And I want you to always remember that. So, as always, thank you guys for listening. I'll see you guys next week. Be great today, and praise God.